Hi there! Welcome back to yet another episode of Book Club. In today's episode and this week, we'll be looking at the genre history again. And we'll be looking at a book which talks about a real person's journey this time round, and it's not a fictional book. Stick around to find out why today's book is also history and why it is so interesting. So firstly, the title of today's amazing and phenomenal book is called Unbroken. So many of you watching this video may have heard about the movie or even watched the movie. But have you read the book? The book gives the same impact and effect as the movie does. So I recommend you reading this book as well, and I'll be talking about what the book is about soon. So the author of today's book is Laura Hillenbrand. Laura Hillenbrand is an American author for novels and magazine articles. So now I'll be talking about what Unbroken is about. So for today's episode, I'll be breaking down Unbroken into a few sections and chapters, starting with chapter 1 to 5 first. So in chapter 1 to 5, it introduces an average boy who lives a normal life like us. And he was born in 1917 and his name is Louie Zamperini. So he came from Italian immigrants who came to USA to live. So as he grew up in Torrance, USA, he became more crime based and he started doing criminal activity since young age. So at 5 years old he started smoking, and at 8 he started drinking liquor. And his brother, P.T., his older brother, became slightly concerned over the fact that he was doing these type of bad things. So going on as well, P.T. realized that Louie Zamperini had a really talent. He was talented in running. And he was super fast considering and comparing to the rest of the people in the neighborhood. So P.T. convinced Zamperini to join the track and field team. And as well, going on in the book, Zamperini got rid of his delinquent exploits and started pursuing his career in running. And when he went on to high school, he also became one of the fastest people there and got a chance to represent USA in the Olympics. But it was soon cut short after World War II when he was going to go for his Olympics in Japan, Tokyo. He was now training to be a bombardier for the US Air Force. So next I'll be talking about chapter 6 to 11, in which it started to show the journey and the beginning of Louie Zamperini's journey and career in the World War II and his job perspective and his role in the World War II. So going on, it starts off with Louie Zamperini in 1942 being stationed to a team and an island in Hawaii, Oahu in Hawaii. And during this time, he and his crewmates had to go and bomb and go through a certain number of rescue missions in which many prisoners of war were trapped by the Japanese. So Louie Zamperini's job was to go on and save and bomb other Japanese islands such as Wake Atoll. And that mission came out successful. But the most latest mission that he had, the last one that he was going for, was another one in which he had to go and rescue some prisoners of war. Unfortunately, Louie's plane suffered a mechanical failure and it crashed in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So next I'll be talking about from chapter 12 to 17. So in chapter 12 to 17 of Unbroken, it describes Louie's journey in sea when after the plane crash. He had to spend a lot of days at sea because there was nobody to rescue him, and there were only 3 survivors: Mac, Phil, and Louie. So Mac and Phil were Louie's friends who were on the plane which crashed, whom survived, and they only had an inflatable boat. So in chapters 12 to 17, it describes how they were hungry and they almost starved to death. They had very limited supply of food and the water was salt water, so that drinking that could bring them to a state of dehydration. And going on, the saddest part of the book was Max succumbed to not having enough food and was ill after that, and he died at sea. And only Phil and Louie survived. So there were many occasions where they thought they were going to be saved, but unfortunately they landed accidentally at Japanese waters, and there was Japanese planes trying to shoot them down and break their boat and make them sink, but Louie and Phil kept them afloat by repairing the boat and doing stuff to it to keep it afloat. And one day, thinking that they were finally safe after finding an island, unfortunately it was filled with Japanese troops and they were arrested. Phil and Louie was then brought to another island called Kwajalein Island in July 16, 1943. Moving on from chapter 18 to 33, it talks about his life in the prisoner of war camps. So firstly, he's been in many prisoner of war camps throughout his story. So the first prisoner of camp war he was in the Kwajalein Island war. Kwajalein Island, in which he was put in a wooden cell-like thing with his friend Phil, and they were starved to death, beaten with very terrible living conditions, and he was always humiliated in front of, until he was moved to a more improved and better place. Even though I mean better, it's not really that good. It's still very bad, but it had all the prisoners of war in one place, unlike in Kwajalein Island where there was only one or two and not many. So when he was moved to the other camp, he met with another corporal who moved on to be a sergeant later on. His name was Mutsuhiro Watanabe, and he was nicknamed the Bird. So when he moved to the prisoner of war camp in Omori and also Naoitsu, Watanabe, also known as the Bird, always picked on him and hated him the most, always beating him with his fist, with his belt, with his stick, and always tortured him, despite him not doing anything to him. Also, he met him at both the Omori prisoner of war camp and the Naoitsu prisoner of war camp. So that was how chapter 18 to 33 described his life in the prisoner of war camps. And after that, when the Allies won over Japan, the Bird, also known as Mutsuhiro Watanabe, went into hiding to escape being found as a war criminal. So the last section of this book and about the book is from chapter 34 to 39. And it describes Louie Zamperini's post-war life. So after the war, it was said and told in both the book and the movie that Louie Zamperini had a problematic life after that. He did marry a woman that he met called Cynthia Applewhite and also had children. But he fell into alcoholism and had dealt with some slight PTSD. And moving on, he had problems and nightmares about his time in the prisoner of war camps and about the Bird, Mutsuhiro Watanabe. And he had some revenge thoughts in his mind. But after he went for preaching, he started developing a sense of what we call redemption and forgiveness to the people who made him suffer, which also led him to go on and prosper in life. And he also got forgiveness from his wife and his family and reunited back with them. As for Mutsuhiro Watanabe, he escaped his punishment and continued living a happy life with 2 children, and he married as well. And he continued earning and earned a fortune from an insurance agency in Japan, Tokyo. And lastly, the most important thing that from the book, the most important scene was that despite coming out from the war being injured, heavily scarred mentally and both physically, he went on to accomplish one of the most highest achievements of a human that we can ever do, which is lifting a torch at the Olympics at the age of 93, mind you. And he carried it and ran for the last time in his life as a form of respect, and he wanted to get that point and achievement, that he wanted to lift the torch and bring it as a sign of him wanting to continue and come back to the Olympics. So next, I'll be talking about my two main takeaways from the Unbroken. So firstly, my first takeaway is that forgiveness brings more peace than revenge and hatred. This can be seen later on in the book, where Zamperini has thoughts about revenge, and that led him to a negative route, having many things such as stress and anger issues. But when he went for the preaching and learned about forgiveness, it opened his eyes to a new perspective of forgiveness, and his condition started improving. So that is one of the main things, and one thing that I would like to tell to the audience is that forgiveness is the biggest and hardest mental strength to achieve, because it is not as easy as it seems. It is very hard to forgive someone after what you have went through. And secondly, my second takeaway from this book is from a quote. Earlier on in the book, when Louie was having so much problems with going out of being a criminal and doing criminal activities, his brother introduced him to racing and wanted him to go for running. But when his internal soul, Louie's internal mind and mindset said that he couldn't do it, his brother told him, if you can take it, you can make it. That's the most important quote. And when he said that, it means that what are you willing to endure to get what you want? And that is one of the most important things that strives people to do good and improve on themselves, which is one of the most important quotes from this book. And those are my two takeaways from The Unbroken. So for movie enthusiasts, there is a movie for Unbroken as well, and I've watched it as well. It was equally as amazing and mesmerizing as the book, and I'll leave all the links in the description for where you can check out both the movie and places to explore the book and read the book as well. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, please slap that like button and subscribe. It really does help me a lot. Thank you so much to my subscribers, and I hope you share this video with your friends and family. With that, see you next week for another episode.